Elwood Babbitt was born in 1921 and passed away in 2001. He was an American deep trance medium known as the Medium of Massachusetts. He showed his psychic ability from a young age. His family supported his psychic gift and took him to the spiritualist community of Lake Pleasant, Massachusetts, in Montague, Massachusetts, where Elwood would assist in the readings. This fact is quite interesting because Lake Pleasant, Massachusetts became the home of the National Spiritual Alliance, the group that ordained Carl Hewitt as a minister. Carl did not receive his ordination through National Spiritualist Association of Churches, but through the National Spiritual Alliance. I think that happened because his mentor, Reverend Bingham, was a member of the National Spiritual Alliance. Elwood Babbitt served in World War II as a Marine in the 2nd Division. He was stationed in Hawaii and predicted the attack on Pearl Harbor. He even told his fellow Marines the day and approximate time of the upcoming attack. During the attack, Babbitt saw spirits as points of light leaving soldiers' bodies in the water. As Babbitt went through the war and numerous battles in Asia, Elwood relied on his psychic abilities to safely lead his division, and he was guided by spirits who helped him avoid danger. Other Marines in his division nicknamed him the Mystic. And with physical death, a daily reality of war, Elwood was able to comfort his fellow Marines with his knowledge. After the war, Elwood Babbitt started working as a trance medium. Charles Hapgood, a friend of his who worked closely with Babbitt, transcribed the tapes of the trance communications and turned them into books. Articles about Babbitt, like this one from the National Enquirer, were written. And then, sometime between fall of 1973 and 1974, Elwood Babbitt appeared on The Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder, demonstrating his gifts of trance on TV. During this presentation, direct quotes from the life reading will be in this font on this background. Commentary, in other words, information that was not in the reading, will be in this font and background. And a summary of the information will be in this font on this background. And then, how the past lives influenced Carl's final physical life will be on this background with this font. So you will know the source of the information just from the background. On April 8, 1983, Carl and I traveled to Massachusetts to get a life reading from Elwood Babbitt. The life reading transcript is 12 pages. The language is quite dense. Here are some highlights from the reading. And of course, which you decide to become mortal or solid energy, rather than to continue in the finer energies throughout the galaxies or forces of vibration, and so assume your role of robe of flesh, which touches your life, first life of 90 to 100,000 years, Earth years ago. Carl had 24 lives upon the Earth, present Earth of the past, defined the responsibility of teacher and leader. It's clear that Carl repeatedly maintained the same focus during his many lives. So you've chosen the correct pathway in this life, and you will find that in the ensuing year and in the 7 years to follow, fuller activity, and of course, opening widely to the portals of remembrances of your creative birth of millions of years ago. So it is interesting because just 3 years after this reading, in May 1986, in Tampa, Florida, at the request of one of his clients, Carl attended his first session with Ramtha the Enlightened One. This definitely opened new portals and avenues to advanced teachings. When this first lecture that he attended ended, Ramtha started to march off the stage. Suddenly, Ramtha stopped, turned around, and walked into the audience directly to Carl. He grabbed Carl by one of his biceps and gently turned him. Then, with the other hand, Ramtha reached to the back of Carl's neck and slid his hand down his spine. As Ramtha did this, he knighted Carl as teacher. So here again, his teachings is being acknowledged. Babbitt told Carl that in his current life, he wasn't drawn to hidden or spiritual knowledge by accident. He was attracted to it because of a deep internal connection between his mind, body, and spirit. This comes from his past lives where he was involved with the Lucjoian schools of ancient Rome. Those schools focused on learning about logic, the natural laws of the physical universe, and living a life free from fear of the gods or death. And the Dharmic sources describe profound moral and spiritual laws that govern the soul, which was based in India. Carl combined these two principles to help guide others. Carl had a past life in India. During this lifetime, he lived in a monastery. The ocean was strongly linked with him. There was a direct, rhythmic connection between Carl's energy and the natural rise and fall of the ocean tides. Water was always important to Carl in his last life. He grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is located on the Intercoastal Way, and he was always fishing when he was a kid. Even as an adult, when he lived in Connecticut, he bought a boat to sail on the Long Island Sound and go fishing. Carl had past lives in Atlantis, where he was a teacher. You always follow the pathway of teaching because it has always been in all dimensions in which you vibrated prior to coming to Earth. In that particular lifetime, you would have a greater interest in engineering, especially that to do with energy. In his life in Atlantis, Carl was a highly advanced engineer who worked with the laws of physics. But the physics then was very different from the physics we know. In Atlantis, technology and consciousness were one and the same. An engineer didn't just repair machines, he used his mind to reshape the physical world and his own biological experience. Carl told me that understanding how things worked always fascinated him. He mentioned that he watched TV shows that explained how specific items were made. So the concept or theme of engineering remained ingrained in his mind from his past life in Atlantis. And it is your own religion or binding and fastening together of your spirit, soul, and body that draw you to these esoteric teachings. Once again, it is simply an acknowledging that which you feel in yourself of being able to guide and to teach others fuller ways of life, its truth and its principles of understanding, of which illuminate the fuller interconnection of yourself. Carl had a past life in Egypt where he served as prime minister to Pharaoh Ramses. Living on the upper and lower peninsulas of Egypt, he was involved in the pyramids. It is in reference to your time spent in your attempts in the life and the times of Ramses, especially those connected to the exodus of slavery, meaning the biblical story of the Hebrews in Egypt. Carl had 3 past lives in Athens. He saw the famous Parthenon, the temple dedicated to the goddess Athena. He participated in the city government, speaking in the chambers where laws were created. And he was familiar with the leader Pericles and studied his ideas at the great school of learning. And he studied with the talented sculptor Phineas, who designed the Parthenon statues. Carl's current artistic skills are a reflection of his abilities he developed during his past lives in Athens. Carl had several past lives in Rome. He was a senator and helped create the laws. He was a praetor, a Roman judge. He relied on his clairvoyance to make fair decisions and administer justice to criminals. In other Roman lives, Carl was very outspoken and despised the violence of the gladiatorial arenas. Because he spoke his mind, he was executed twice, once by beheading and once by a spear in the back. These injuries carried over in his current physical body as soul memories. The neck cracking or stiffness he experienced was caused by the beheading. The lower back pain or sudden cramps were due to the spear wound. Essentially, Carl's body remembered old injuries that didn't happen in his last lifetime but occurred during his past lives. Carl had past lives in Machu Picchu. Here it is also mentioned your time is seen in Machu Picchu of Peru, the ancient civilization, which you would have been responsible for bringing forward those aliens from other galaxies, which would have been part of your ways of teaching of the past. I mention Machu Picchu because it will show you a definite pattern of intercommunication with these aliens or angels, as you may call them, those that have graduated throughout the different classrooms of the laws of all creation. Carl had an encounter with extraterrestrials when he was 5 years old. We're going to watch a video clip from Making Known the Unknown, our cable TV show, filmed on April 4th, 2003. So you are going to hear Carl describe what happened to him in his own words.
Carl, why don't you tell the viewers of the story about what happened to you when you were a child and your mother with the beans? With the neighbor lady?
Oh, God. I'll tell it, but this is a story that... Anyway, I was born and raised on the farm, and I guess I was around 5 years old. It was in the month of May, I know that, because at that time we grew all of our food and everything else at my mother. It was string beans, I think, yeah, string beans. And my mother and Miss Abby, down there, everybody called the first, like you, your Tina, it would be Miss Tina.
Right, right.
And they had gone to the garden and picked all these beans. And they had big wash tub full of beans, sitting on the porch and getting them ready to can them for the winter. And I was sitting over here in the swing, and they were sitting over here. And the other kids were going to school, because it was probably the last end of the school, I think. And the road went by the house was a dirt road, going down to the end of the peninsula. And I looked over, and there was sort of a knoll, and at the top of this knoll there was a fire tower at one time, because it was the highest spot around there. And that tower had been taken down, and there was these three entities. Is that the one you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
These three entities that were coming down this path, coming down towards me. I'd seen them before. They had visited with me before, and but they had big eyes and little tiny mouth. And their clothes, if you want to call it that, looked like didn't have any seams in them. And they were very small people. And they were coming down towards me, but Mama and Miss Abby, their backs were sort of towards them, so they wouldn't have seen them. But as they crossed that road and got halfway from the road to the house, they must have done something to control my mother's mind and Miss Abby's mind. And they must have taken over my mind, because the next thing I remembered, I was between those three people. In other words, there was two of them behind me and one of them in front of me, and I was following them up that path. And then I got up to the top of the hill. There was this spaceship that was there that looked like a bullet, like well, if you know what a bullet for a .22 rifle looks like, well, it looked like an enormous one. You know, it would fit in this whole room.
Okay.
Probably stand 40, 50 feet high. And it would look like it was made out of aluminum or stainless steel. And I remember as we came close to it, and it was absolute silent, this tongue, or whatever you call it, slid out like this, and then we walked right up. And we walked right up. I had to follow this one person, these two behind me, and I went up, and as I looked back, it was like going into a laboratory.
Really?
And I don't know what they did to me. Were they controlling my mind? I don't remember them giving me any shots or anything. And then the next time I remembered anything, I was sitting by a porthole. I was sitting like here. I felt as if I was strapped in, but there was a porthole in front of me, and I saw the planet way down there somewhere. And it was then that I was coming out of this daze that I was in, and I was crying. I didn't want to be there. And then the next thing I remember, I was back here somewhere on a table. That it reminded me of being in a room where the table would be metal, like you would see at a veterinarian hospital, see. And I don't know what they were doing to me there, but then I wound up in that same chair or same seat, still looking at the earth, but I felt as if I was closer to it. And then a little while later, I was back there. They were leading me out of this thing, and then I was walking back towards the house, and we were walking across the road, and the next thing I remember, I was sitting back in the swing, and I remember my mother saying, "My God, Miss Abby, look where the sun is." She was not wearing a watch. I don't think she even had a watch. And she got up and went in the house to check the clock. She had one of them old big clocks, you know.
Right.
And she says, "You realize what time it is? It's 3:45. and we haven't got these beans done. We should have these beans done 2 hours ago. So they must have been put in a daze or a sleep or a trance or something, and all that time was wasted, and they kept talking about it all afternoon that they got nothing done. And I don't know how long it was after that that I saw those I don't know what to call them. I didn't want to call them men, or I felt like calling them creatures. Coming, and I started crying, and I said to Mama, "Don't let them take me. Don't let them take me." She didn't know what I was talking about because she couldn't see them.
Right, but you could see them.
I could see it. And I remember becoming hysterical, but she couldn't see them, and I really thought she was lying to me, because they were just as real as these cameras are in this room.
That was Carl's unique experience with aliens. Carl told me that the aliens had put some kind of implants in his body. About 7 or 8 years before he died, Carl talked to his doctor about having them removed. Then Spirit told him not to do it. I believe those implants might have been transmitters, allowing the aliens to communicate with him, or sent signals that influenced his thoughts at times. That's just my theory. In 1977, Carl took several of his students to the movie theater to see the new film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It was very important to him that we all watched and understood the movie. Because he had several encounters with extraterrestrials, he wanted us to know that aliens were really real and not something made up. Carl had past lives in Italy. He lived in Genoa or Naples, strictly following the religious rules of the Catholic Church. Carl also had past lives in England. He lived in 17th century London during King Charles' first reign. He was part of the clergy, but struggled to genuinely believe in either Presbyterianism or Episcopalianism. He eventually grew cynical about organized religion. Since he rejected these traditional views, he explored radical new beliefs. He was branded a heretic and thrown into prison, which really was hard for him because he hated being confined in small spaces. Carl had past lives in Denmark. Although he wasn't officially called a minister, he taught deep spiritual beliefs. These ideas were a natural part of his identity, not things he learned in school. Carl had 4 lives as a woman, which he chose of his own free will to help him achieve balance. He practiced being receptive, patient, and open to others instead of just taking control or acting aggressively, which are more traditionally masculine traits. So to balance out the masculine energies with the feminine energies, he had some more lives as a female. Carl's mission in his last life. For I assure you, you are more than a physical body, and you've come to lead and to guide thousands, of which you will see, as your world enters its different changes, the axial shift, the climate waves, and the totally new face of creation represented upon your world. Babbitt is discussing our entry into the age of knowledge. You are not chosen for this work. You've chosen it yourself and surrendered your stations of life in the outer dimensions, which places you within the 6th law of the universe. Now that we know the details of Carl's past lives, it is no surprise that he spent his last life passionately teaching us about the gifts of the Spirit and continues the same mission from the spirit world. His work was to guide us and prepare us for the upcoming age of knowledge that will soon arrive on our planet.